In this video, I want to give you guys a really general understanding of web development and how the code you're writing fits into the internet as a whole and fits into building and designing websites. To start that off, I want to define a few basic terms, and the first and maybe most important one of those is web browser. So whether you know it or not, you've been using web browsers probably all your life. Web browsers are programs like Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, or Safari. And what a web browser basically does is it takes this code we have here on the left and it turns it into this nice laid out like web page that you see here. Because I don't know about you guys, but this is not a very good way for me to understand the internet. I can't use this. But this thing here on the right, this looks really good to me. I understand this, I can use it, I can interact with it. It's beautiful. So the web browser takes this code here that it gets on the left and it turns it into an actual web page. And what we're going to be starting out learning to write is this code here for the web browser to build our own web pages. Another term I wanted to define really quickly was the internet, because I think sometimes people get the internet confused. The idea of the internet is not that complicated, even though its execution is very complicated. Basically, the internet is just a bunch of interconnected computers. So I've got a computer over here. We can say Google has a computer over here. And when I go to google.com, basically what I'm doing is I'm connecting my computer to Google's computers, and then they're exchanging information back and forth. And those connections between between millions and millions of computers is basically what the internet is. And phones, we can't forget phones. You also might have heard the term server before, and server really is just another word for computer. A server is a really specific kind of computer that's very good at doing one specific thing. For instance, the Google servers are very good at giving you the web pages for search results. That's all they do. They serve web pages for search results. The YouTube servers are just for storing and returning web pages with videos, just for streaming video services. So servers are really just specialized computers we use to host a specific website or service, like Google or Facebook or TikTok or Amazon or any website you could possibly name. They're all hosted on a server somewhere. Now that we have some of those basic terms defined, I want to talk about how we actually get a web page from like a Google or an Amazon or a YouTube server. So let's say you're on your computer at home. Here's your computer. And here's your web browser. We'll say you're using like Google Chrome or something. And in the address bar, you type in something like youtube.com. And over here, we have the server. Big giant sets of racks of computers that hold all the YouTube information. These are YouTube servers. So now you've typed in youtube.com. You've clicked enter, what happens? So first of all, youtube.com is a domain name, which is basically just an address of the YouTube servers, because there's a lot of computers connected to the internet. We specifically want the YouTube servers. youtube.com will point us to where those servers are. So now when you click enter, your computer knows the address it's looking for, and basically what it does is it finds the YouTube servers, and it basically asks them a question. It says, hey, YouTube servers, can I get the code to load the YouTube homepage for this user? What happens next is the YouTube servers take that request and they sort of process it internally. They figure out a bunch of stuff. They figure out, are you logged in? What's your user? What videos should we show you on your recommended feed? What subscriptions do you have that should show up in your subscriptions feed? All that stuff. And they're basically going to build you your very own web page and send that back to your computer. So they're going to compile a bunch of code that looks something like this and send it back to your computer and to your web browser so that it can interpret it. So it sends back a file that looks like something like all that HTML and CSS and JavaScript code I was just showing. It looks something like this. And it's going to take that code and send it back to your web browser. Then your web browser here, your Google Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Internet Explorer, is going to take that code and use that code to actually generate what that website looks like. So we're talking about YouTube, so YouTube looks something like this. We have a search bar at the top, and it shows you like a bunch of your recommended videos, and your subscriptions over here, and your playlists over here, and so on. It uses that code that the server sent it to actually create the web page. And so a lot of web development is actually broken up into these two separate things. So we have the code here that we send to the computer, to our computer, that creates the actual web page, that creates something like this, like my little adventure game. But there's also code over on these servers, and the code on the server is used to build those web pages in the code we send to the browsers. They're two different things. So the code that we use to store and process and manipulate data on a server, that's called backend code. So this is our backend. Everything that happens on the server is part of the backend. Over here, when we're writing code that's going to show up in our actual web browser, that's called the front end. And we're going to be focusing mainly here on front end first because it's a little easier, it's a little less abstract, and you have to know a bit about front end before you can get into back end code. So we're not going to worry about the code that runs on the server. We're just going to worry about writing code that's going to show up in our web browsers, that our web browsers can use to show us websites. Now that you have a general idea of how the internet works and what the code you're writing actually does and where it comes from, let's talk about the actual code we need to do front-end development, to write what we see here that shows up in our web page. When we're doing front-end web development, we have a couple of technologies that we're going to use a lot. And those technologies are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They're kind of all their different own little languages that are used to do different things on a web page. So first of all, we have HTML. And what HTML is the structure of the web page. It's all the stuff that actually shows up. It's this image, it's this text here, it's these buttons down here, it's the whole page is HTML. So if I got rid of all of the HTML on my page, it would look something like this. Very boring. There would be nothing here. That's because HTML is it's like the skeleton of the web page. Without the skeleton, the whole thing is going to fall apart. The next thing I want to talk about is CSS. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it's how we design our websites. It's how we change how they look. So for instance, if I got rid of the CSS here, my styles, and I reload the page, it's going to look a lot different. That's because I still have all the content of the page, the HTML stuff, the images, the paragraphs, the buttons, they're all still there, and it actually will still even work correctly. But all my styles are gone, and it looks kind of boring and plain. So CSS is going to let us change the layout and the look of our website. The final technology is JavaScript, and JavaScript is the actual behavior of the website. It's how it works. So right now I can click on these buttons, and it'll take us through a little bit of a short adventure game. And that is happening because of JavaScript. JavaScript is changing this web page as I click on these buttons. Now, if I get rid of my JavaScript, and then I reload the page, you're going to see the page looks exactly the same. But when I go to click on these buttons, nothing's going to actually happen anymore. That's because the JavaScript was controlling the behavior of the website, what happens on the website. When I click on things or I move my mouse, how the website changes. Between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we can pretty much configure our website to do almost anything we want it to do. Remember, HTML is the structure, CSS is the design and look of the website, and JavaScript is the behavior and actions of the website.